Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. I'm Dina, a Customer Success Lead at DA. I'm sure you all must be a little familiar with DA since you're here, but in case you're not, please allow me to give you a little brief. So basically, through our AI-driven consumer intelligence platform, which is Sila, Sila means connection in Arabic, we're able to understand over 20 Arabic dialects. This really helps us understand what our consumers are thinking, doing, and saying more than any other platform, making our insights a lot more faster, simpler, and more accurate. For today's webinar, please allow me to introduce our strategy and insights lead, Faisal, who will be taking us through an abridged version of a research that we've done. This research is actually really exciting because it's around one of the trendiest buzzwords that we hear in every single client meeting nowadays, which is sustainability. I hope you enjoy it. Before I go, please note that this recording or the session will be recorded and it will be shared with you. It will also be on our website. You can go through it later on. If you have any questions or comments throughout our discussion, you can just leave them in the chat and we'll go through them towards the end. Faisal, hi, the mic is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dina. And thank you everyone for joining on a Monday morning. Looking forward to discussion on sustainability, quite an exciting topic. Various meetings we go to, various discussions we're having with clients. There's always this topic that comes around sustainability. A lot of hypotheses, a lot of questions around it. Questions like, is sustainability really important to build in our brand narrative? Is it something that's relevant to consumers? Is it relevant? Okay, it might be relevant to some parts of the world, but what about our consumers in, let's say, Saudi, UAE, Kuwait, the GCC, the other Arabic countries? And, what is it that, if it's important, what about it? Is it important? Is it certain aspects of whether it's climate change, whether it's environment, whether it's social sustainability? So we wanted to put all that to rest and kind of do a study and understand the consumer perspective and various other elements which I'll talk about on sustainability. It's a complex topic. It's a complex topic because there isn't any agreed upon definition of sustainability. But if you look at all the various versions of what sustainability is, it's perhaps something that helps us safely coexist as beings on this earth, on this planet, and not only us, but also ensures that our future generations also safely coexist. So I'll move on with what we have in today for all of you. Before actually talking about the opportunities around sustainability and what our key findings are, I think it's also important for you to understand where that data is coming from, right? How have we captured all the data around sustainability and what we're presenting, what's the source of that? So Dina did briefly tell you about Sila, which is our Arabic native AI technology. So we've used that, we've leveraged that to source all conversations happening in the region around sustainability. What interestingly we've done that is we've kind of split all the conversations by consumers. So what is it that consumers are talking about? Because that kind of tells us how do we build resonance with consumers. We've managed to kind of source 3.4 plus million posts with 400,000 plus unique users. We've got a lot of data around brands. So what is the conversation that brands are driving around sustainability? We've done this across 900 plus brands in the region that are relevant in the region. And similarly, government. There's a lot of conversations that are going on in the government, in the region. And government becomes important because they pretty much drive the conversation of how the future is looking like. They are capable of nudging consumer behavior. And we'll see all these three entities. So how I've split the presentation and the discussion for today, just to keep it simple because we have a large version and there's a lot of data we had, but for the time we have in hand today for the objective, we kind of created a summary version. So key highlights on community, brand, and government, and how do they all kind of come together. So I'll start with community. So like I did say a while back that we managed to kind of source 3.4 million plus conversation around sustainability, and this is the representation that you see that how it spans across or splits across the different key GCC markets, that's Saudi, UAE, and Kuwait. Why this slide is interesting, because often what happens in survey-based methodologies of collecting data, you will have a predefined sample design. In this, what happens, while this is the sample or the source of the data, it's actually a finding in itself, because you have almost, they're all conversations that are organic in nature, that are organic in nature, because they are they're naturally, people are naturally having these conversations online, where they're almost we're not predetermining any kind of a sample. And very interestingly, because we had a lot of questions whether is it only limited to UAE, or is it relevant Saudi, the topic of sustainability. And if you look at this, it's got its universality across the markets. It's pretty representative and aligned with the overall population of the population representation. Moving on, sustainability, how is it changing year on year? And to me, this is one of the most powerful slides, because it gives you a very realistic picture of how sustainability is becoming more and more important with time. So if you look at how much people are talking about sustainability from 2019 to 2020 to 2021, and these are absolute scores that you see on the top with the percentage increase. So in the last 2 years, there's almost 100% increase in the significance, in the relevance of sustainability, and how that's kind of growing in the region. So not only that, but if you look at the engagement and how much people are engaging and interacting with all the content on sustainability. So what the previous slide told you is, as an individual, let's say Faisal is talking about sustainability. So that was telling you how there's a significant increase in people talking about sustainability. But there's also a significant increase how people are interacting with that content on sustainability. So if you look, the bars that here are the engagements, which necessarily means, which kind of translates into people liking, commenting, or basically engaging with any content around sustainability. Interactions is, how you're kind of interacting with that content, and how it's increasing year on year. So and it runs into millions. If you see the numbers, I don't want to, it's up there on the slide, but it runs into millions. So it's forming this huge community where there's a significant proportion of people showing an interest in sustainability, and a much larger proportion who's kind of engaging on that content. So it just runs into millions in terms of people, or in terms of interactions there. So yes, what I've established so far is that sustainability is important, sustainability is critical, but what about sustainability? What is it that people are talking about? Where are all these 420 people, 1,000 people talking about? So if you look at it, it's primarily a key pillar of that is social sustainability. I'll also tell you what social sustainability, or aspects of social sustainability, people talk about. But social sustainability almost forms 60% of the conversation. It is also a pillar. It's been culturally ingrained over the years in the region. The spikes you see, the top line, which is representative of social sustainability, that top line, or the peaks you see there, those are the months of Ramadan. So social sustainability, the initiatives around those phases of the year, or those parts of the year, kind of have a significant role to play. But overall, it's historically been there. So while environment, yes, it's significant in this larger scale, we're talking about 1/4 of the conversations being on the environment, which is very significant. And I'm going to talk about why environment and what aspects of environment makes it important. But so far, social sustainability and environment, two key pillars, with social sustainability leading it. And when I talk about social sustainability, what is it? So social sustainability has got three key aspects to it. Your first is philanthropy, which is around charities, donations, and that's what the peaks you see during Ramadan. Health is a very interesting one, because aspects like mental health awareness are growing. And I think COVID per se has a huge role to play here, because during those years, we've realized that how significant health is, and mental health as a subject is no more a taboo. It's something people are acknowledging, talking about its significance and the role it plays in the overall health. And then it's followed by what you call as equality and empowerment. I do remember that I think 4, 5, 6 years back, empowerment, women empowerment, and themes like that used to be a very critical source. So it's still there, but I think aspects of general social equalities and health have overshadowed that aspect, and that's becoming much more important in today's narrative, at least the way the consumers are driving the conversation. Moving on to environment, which is the other strong pillar, important pillar to consumers. And this is, to me, one of the most powerful slides of the presentation, because it tells me three big things here. The first big thing it tells me is that when it comes to climate change, animal welfare is huge. And when you talk about animal welfare, and that too in this region, it means things like plant-based food, vegetarian diet, veganism, cruelty-free, talking about ethical sourcing, ethical farming. So those aspects are forming your kind of highest proportion of discussion or interest when it comes to environment, followed by climate change and pollution. But I think you also need to understand that how that's changing, because if you look at this chart below, trend. So what you see here is a 3-year time frame data from 2019 till date. But if I break that data down to, let's say, just the last 1 year, animal welfare comes down to by around 15%, a little more than 15, around 16%. And by that same proportion, the relevance of climate change and pollution is increasing. And you can see this, how these two trend charts are intersecting. And it just goes on to say that animal welfare, yes, there was a whole revolution. It's still relevant, not to say because it's from a long-term perspective, from a macro perspective, it's still huge, it's still relevant. But I think climate change is slowly taking center stage, and the way it's progressing in terms of the trend, it is likely to overshadow and cross and be the dominant environmental sustainability theme as we progress. So that's the key highlights. Like I said, you'll find a lot of market-wise, a lot of demographic-wise nuances and topic-level analysis in the detailed report. But so to say, I think the key highlights so far that we've seen on community or the users or consumers, so to say, are is sustainability important? Yes, it is important. The significance is growing year on year, very relevant to this region. So if you're a brand, without having sustainability as a part of your narrative, I think you're missing out on a huge opportunity. Within that, I think we need to acknowledge that social sustainability is a key pillar. So somehow we need to kind of build that in our way we are communicating, which aspects around health, philanthropy, and the initiatives around that. And within environment, yes, animal welfare is huge, but I think it's the climate change. And when I say climate change, there are aspects like recyclability, reusability, climate action that come into action and kind of come into priority when we're talking about environment. So that's pretty much on consumers. Moving on to government. And like I was telling you in the beginning that government is an important stakeholder, because they pretty much drive a lot of conversation on this topic, and they have a huge influence on consumer behavior. To give you one example, in the last few months, I think a couple of months back, the UAE government decided to charge for plastic bags. I think it's around 25-50 fils for a plastic bag, which then by force it almost is changing consumer behavior, where they're adopting shopping bags that are recyclable, jute bags, etc. That's just one example, right? But there are efforts around, let's say, electric vehicles, etc. And there are multiple initiatives by the government, and that's why they become important, because they almost give a sneak peek into the future, that what is the future going to look like. So I won't spend too much on this time, because I think for everyone who's in the region across any of the GCC markets understands and knows that the leadership has been very vocal on the role of sustainability and the future of this region. You do see a specific spike around COVID times, because I think there was a lot of initiative around health, a lot of campaigns around health, the importance of health vaccinations, etc. But overall, we've got UAE's got a plan till 2050. Saudi's got a similar plan to become, they've got very optimistic plans if you kind of read about the details. And UAE is expected to be having the biggest climate event in next year, 2023, sorry. And that's going to likely to kind of talks a lot about the leadership intention around sustainability. Very, very interesting, because it's just ironic, the similarities in which the government data almost mirrors the consumer, or the other way around, if you want to so to say it. But they're very similar. They're going hand in hand, and like it just goes on to prove our hypothesis that how government's tonality, how government priorities have an influence on consumer behavior and consumer priorities. So very similar numbers that you see here, the priority being social sustainability, followed by environment. And when I say general sustainability, it's really about where it's more around general awareness of sustainability, but not necessarily targeted at a specific cause, a specific initiative, but talking about how generally sustainability is important and how we need to progress. Again, if you deep dive into social sustainability, interesting because it's very similar to what we saw in consumers. So they've got philanthropy as a priority, charities, donation, housing programs. You've got health, a lot of work around health awareness, which included mental health also. So a lot of initiative by the government on that front. And equality and empowerment has always been there, right from human rights, tolerance, women empowerment, diversity. Youth empowerment is a new one where there's a lot of activity around startups and encouraging the youth out there. But yeah, social sustainability per se is a priority. Where things change is environment. And not change, but it almost explains the behavior of the suddenness, not suddenness, but the trend around climate change. So you see a very significant upclimb in the trend of climate change and how that's becoming more significant with time and how that's almost overshadowing any other aspect of environment. And if you look at the government, almost all their conversation right now at this point of time or over the last few years has been around climate change, climate action, clean and renewable energy, recycling, reusability, and it kind of spans across the three markets, government entities, and that's kind of a priority area. And that only reinforces the importance it's likely to take in the near future. So that was primarily around consumers and the government. This is perhaps the most significant and important part of our discussion today, because we're all doing this to understand how well are brands aligned with consumers. How are they acknowledging that sustainability is this important in the region? Are they acknowledging the aspects of sustainability that are that people are interested in? Are the governments driving their conversation? The answer perhaps is somewhere a yes and no. Because the yes is because I think they do acknowledge that sustainability is a relevant topic, is something which is important for me to build in my strategies. So if you look at the past data, there are 20% more brands talking about sustainability or adding sustainability to their narrative from the previous years. And within those brands, not collectively within the brands, the same brands that have been talking about sustainability have 50% more content around sustainability than the previous year. So both the number of brands adding sustainability in their strategy, plus the importance of sustainability, if it's already there, that's also increasing. So very clearly, brands are also acknowledging that sustainability is becoming much more important to consumers as well as to the government, and that's something we cannot do without. However, I think the big no or the big miss out is there is a lot of focus on the environment, which is great because we've seen that environment is growing, it's becoming important, but it almost feels like it's coming at the cost of social sustainability. Because as much as we talk about environment, let us not forget that it is social sustainability which is the key pillar. We're almost with the highest levels of interest both for consumers and the government is still there, and it is likely to stay. It is something which is they've always believed in social equalities, in gender equalities, in women empowerment. There's a lot of initiatives around that, around health, becoming the activities they're doing around health equality. So that whole equality space is going to remain important as much. Even environment, while the focus on environment is there, that's not something which we can negotiate. So social sustainability per se is a non-negotiable pillar, and there's something where brands are falling far behind. On environment sustainability, it's great, but again, I think there is a lot of focus on animal welfare, which is of course driven by a lot of FMCG brands, where there are huge conversations and huge prioritization of plant-based, organic, food safety, cruelty, vegan, vegetarian. which is also, like I said, I'm not saying that it's not relevant, but it's not necessarily aligned with how the government is driving the future conversation on environment, and also not how consumers are changing, because it's all becoming about climate. It's all becoming about single-use plastic, recycling, climate change, carbon footprint, emission, renewable sources of energy. So somewhere climate change brands need to acknowledge that climate change needs to take that center stage, and it needs to align itself with how consumers are thinking, how consumer thinking is changing over time, and how governments are likely to start investing much more in that space of climate change. On social sustainability, I think it's a big opportunity area that brands are currently missing out on. It's just not enough, because something that is a priority to pretty much everyone, it's such a large audience, it's somewhere taking a backseat. With some conversations, with some interest, but still a lot to do here, especially in the philanthropy health space. There are a lot of opportunities that can be leveraged out there. The other big concern when we do a sector-wise analysis of brands, and we have in the detailed deck, we have like a slide or a detailed in-depth analysis of each of these sectors. But broadly, if we kind of break down the different sectors, all these conversations that we talk about brands is primarily led by F&B, fashion and retail, and services. Services would include hospitality, and financial would be the most representative. But it's just coming from there. There are certain sectors that are just not taken up the sustainability narrative yet, like health and beauty brands, auto brands, technology brands, telecom. And there's huge opportunities around there, especially in the environmental space, where these brands can kind of build on around sustainability. But it's just that it's primarily driven by a very selected set of categories. And for each of them, we do have a breakdown. But just to kind of say, there is a lot of catch-up to be done by certain sectors, especially, health and beauty, auto, technology, telecom, and there's a lot they can kind of do there. So that's broadly giving you a picture of where the region stands on sustainability, by giving you a very holistic picture on community, brands, government. I won't spend too much time on this slide, because it's pretty much summarizes what I've spoken about, and I think I've made myself clear in terms of where the brands are missing out, the opportunities that are there, whether that's sector-wise opportunities, whether that's the causes they need to take up. But the key points are around your social sustainability being your key pillar, environment, which is primarily being driven currently by animal welfare, but there's a huge opportunity in climate, and that's the future. And when I say future, I'm not talking about 3 years, 4 years, but I'm talking about in the coming 6 months, 1 year, the way it's kind of how fast we see it's trending. There are some differences which I've not talked about in our discussion today, because it becomes a little too much for a discussion of this nature, but we've got some market-wise differences, we've got some sector-wise differences, you've got some age-wise differences that you can kind of see how that kind of aligns with your overall brand and target audience. Before I do end, we talked about opportunities, we talked about broadly, I gave you a sense of the demographic profile. But I think it's also important to understand who are these consumers psychographically. What is it really that's motivating? What's the motivation behind this whole interest around sustainability? Where does this sudden interest in sustainability come from? Who are these people? And is it really the cause? Is it just image driven? Is it I want to fit in? And that becomes important to know, because that will decide how you formulate your messaging, how you reach out to them, how you connect with this audience, and most importantly, where do you connect with them? What kind of means, what tools do you need to reach out to them? We do have there's some explanations in the detailed deck, but there's this the model we adopt, it's a personality insights model that we adopt, and we've kind of mastered it over the last few years, which I'm happy to share more details in some other forum perhaps, or some other round of discussion. But broadly, I'll tell you how to read this and what we can take out of this. Psychographically, who are these set of people, and what's really driving them to sustainability? So the two key big points that I want to highlight is this audience, or this set of consumers, can be defined as open, which essentially means that they're driven by newness, excitement, and it's so innovation for these set of people becomes very important. So if you're able to leverage sustainability as a means of innovation, as a tool of innovation, that's a huge opportunity area, whether that's packaging related, whether that's promotion related, whether that's how you're communicating, but or the product benefits, how that's kind of coming across. But innovation is something that will interest these people because it's all about the newness and excitement. What they aren't doing, and that's what I've highlighted here, the 32% you see there, they're not necessarily rationally thinking through the decision. Yes, product might be important, but it's a very emotionally led discussion, a very emotionally led motivation that consumers have. And that's why it becomes important to have your messaging more around emotions versus rationally or logically explaining why it's important for me to make a choice that's that's rooted in sustainability. How do you reach out to them? Where do you reach out to them? What is really influencing them when they're making a choice or picking up a product or picking up a service that is sustainable? Or how do they kind of what influences that decision? It's primarily coming from online ads and social media across markets. So the values you see, it's very so if there's any communication, anything that needs to be done is going to come from online and social media, where they're being influenced the most, which is true for a lot of other categories, but sustainability, because I mean, if I go back, I haven't covered the demographics here, but if I go to the demographics, the demographics are primarily under the age of 30, where you have 50% less than 30%, 30 years old, and the rest are some product utility, etc. So that's pretty much a summarized version of what we had for you. Like I said, we're sitting a lot of data across entities, sectors, age bands, etc. We also have a detailed version of this, but we have data beyond the detailed version of the deck. But happy to address any questions and discussions, which I think, Dina, over to you. If you've got any questions noted, or if there's anything that's come your way.
Actually, we don't have any questions. I'm sure people need some time to go through this recording once again, just to absorb everything you've mentioned. You've really covered a lot of things regarding sustainability. So I think we'll just give it a couple of minutes to see if anyone's got any question before we wrap this up.
So while the questions are coming in, I think that just the key points are that I think my biggest takeout personally after going through all this, two big takeouts, is that I wasn't sure how relevant sustainability as a topic is in this region. I think that's something which, because there's been a lot of hypotheses, I think there's no more discussion required whether, sustainability is something that's important. There's enough and more data to prove that sustainability is very critical to consumers. So if you have to build resonance, sustainability is something that needs to come up. The second big thing is, while we've established that it's the most important, currently, while brands are doing a lot around sustainability, the data suggests that they're not necessarily speaking to the consumers on the relevant topics around sustainability. And that's something where they need to assess. Of course, the category relevance and everything comes at picture, but they need to align their initiatives, their conversation, whatever they're doing around sustainability to be aligned the way consumers are thinking, what's important to them, because that's not necessarily happening at this point in time. But that's pretty much how I would see this. Of course, there are a lot of nuances in the findings, but broadly, I'd summarize it this way.
Everyone usually prefers, jumping on a trend. And since sustainability is all that everyone's talking about nowadays, brands sometimes fail to really understand what their consumers are most interested in, even when it comes to sustainability, which topic, which aspect. So it really differs from a brand to another, from a consumer to another, from a category to another. So this is something that's spot on. Can we have a copy of this report? This is a great report. Thank you. I said.
Yeah, you'll need to reach out to Dina, and we've got the recordings uploaded, and depending on what your requirement is, the reports can be made available.
Sure, just reach out to us. This recording will be shared with you, and it will also be on our website. For the full report, please do. Oh, someone else asked for the same question. Please do reach out to us. You'll find either one of our emails in the confirmation email that you've received once you registered, and we'll get in touch with you. We have one question coming in. If a brand still didn't initiate the sustainability conversation, where would you recommend to start?
I think the good part about the question is that the need to start is acknowledged. So yes, there is a need to start for sure, because if you haven't started, it's already late. A lot of that would depend on what category you are. So whether you're a technology, whether you're a product, whether you're a service, banking, etc. But I think most of the initiatives, the beauty about sustainability and its initiatives is that relevance spans across sectors, brands. It's just that the detailing will change depending on the category or the brand. But so to say, it looks like your pillar, you cannot, social sustainability is non-negotiable. If you're able to build in health or philanthropy in your narrative. Apart from that, I think environment is where I'll bet my money on. When I talk about environment, I mean recyclability, reusability, climate change, because that's something which is a priority across multiple consumers, multiple consumer profiles, and there's a very significant effort that's driven by the government, so it's likely to be one big space out there.
I think that will be all.
Thank you very much. Thank you for joining in.
Thank you all. Thank you so much. Wait for you to reach out to us just in case you have any questions or any challenges that you would like us to help you out with. Thank you again, and we look forward to our next webinar with you all. Thank you. Have a good day.